My name is Barry Anderson. I'm an Associate Justice on the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Hello, my name is Miriam Amarsadeghi. I participated in the We the People program the very first year that it was offered. And I run an organization that provides civic education to people living in Iran, which is where I'm originally from.
And I'm James Rice, and I work on Capitol Hill for U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa.
Would you be so kind as to introduce yourself and your faculty and advisors?
Hello, my name is George. We're representing Lincoln High School from Portland, Oregon. Today, we'll be discussing the philosophical and historical origins of the Constitution.
Good afternoon, my name is Leah.
Hi, my name is Amelia. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Greetings, my name is Piper. Good afternoon, my name is Kate.
Hello, my name is Jonathan. We'd like to thank our principal, Peyton Chapman, our teacher, George Tenike, and our coach, Stephen Griffith. And we'd also like to thank you, judges, for being here today.
Very good. Suppose I should pull out the question. To the surprise of nobody, we are going to be discussing Unit 1 here. What are the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system? And the question that we're going to be talking about today is number 3. Why have the Magna Carta, the Petition of Right, and the English Bill of Rights been called the landmark English Charters of Liberty? What important constitutional rights did they establish? How are these 3 Charters of Liberty related to natural rights philosophy? And finally, how are these Charters of Liberty related to classical republicanism? Is the timekeeper ready?
I am ready.
If the timekeeper is ready, you may begin.
The great English charters were landmarks along the long road to liberty. Over 500 years, the English Constitution evolved until executive power was subject to rule of law, legislative power was held by representatives of the people, and judicial power was used to find new rights to address new threats.
Magna Carta was a landmark of liberty because it began the rule of law. Dictated by the church and barons, it contained 62 promises by King John to follow feudal custom and an unprecedented enforcement clause. The whole constitutional history of England, or of Bishop Stubbs, is little more than commentary on Magna Carta. Although later kings reconfirmed its rights over 40 times, Magna Carta itself fell into neglect.
The Petition of Right was a landmark of liberty because it revived Magna Carta after 400 years to counter claims of divine right to rule and new abuses. To Charles I's claim of absolute prerogative, the author of the petition, Sir Edward Coke, replied, "Magna Carta is such a fellow as will have no sovereign."
The English Bill of Rights was a landmark because it marked the triumph of Parliament as the protector of liberty. Before William and Mary could take the throne, they had to confirm the rights of Magna Carta in the petition, declare new liberties, and agree not to interfere with Parliament. To accomplish this without bloodshed in 1689 was indeed a glorious revolution.
By 1689, the general principles known as the English Constitution included political and civil rights we find today in the American Constitution. The political rights of consent to taxation, jury service, and free speech while legislating were included.
The civil rights of life, liberty, and property were also protected, both substantively and procedurally. The English charters contained substantive liberty rights on travel, imprisonment, and punishment. They contained property rights on land, inheritance, and compensation. They also included procedural rights of notice, speedy trial, competent judges, and an impartial jury of one's peers.
However, these landmark charters did not protect First Amendment religious rights or a general right to free speech and press. Even today, England has an established church, and speech is less protected than in the US.
The irony of relating these charters of liberty to natural rights is that all 3 charters were written before natural rights philosophy was popularized. Magna Carta was written 436 years before Hobbes' Leviathan. The English Bill of Rights was written before John Locke's second treatise of government was published. Natural rights as we know them have no home in Hobbes' Leviathan. They are right at home in Locke's second treatise.
In Locke's State of Nature, every person has the right to life, liberty, and possessions. People give government enough power to protect those rights and reserve the right to alter it if it fails. Locke uses the same faculty, reason, to protect the same rights as the Charters of Liberty. Locke's government is the government of liberty.
To William Blackstone, an American columnist, natural rights and English liberties were interchangeable. It shall be taken for granted, wrote Jonathan Mayhew, that this natural right is secured by Magna Carta. Thomas Jefferson made the same assumption in the Declaration of Independence. He proved that the colonists' natural rights had been violated by showing that the king had destroyed English liberties.
Classical republicanism emphasizes common values. All three charters had confirmed rights which English courts had declared to be the common law of England since time immemorial. The courts that found those rights were not making new law. They were enforcing the values of the community, a classical republican function. Bishop Stubbs was once again correct when he wrote, "The Great Charter was the first great act of the English nation after it had realized its own identity."
Americans today face government power on 100 fronts. The rights that protect us from that power, however, are 800 years old. Thank you.
All right, let's begin with the Declaration of Independence. As you look at the Declaration of Independence and compare it to these great charters, what similarities do you see and what differences do you see? And I'm probably as interested in the latter as I am the former.
Many of the grievances listed in the Declaration were things that are protected by the Charters of Liberty. We can see that consent to taxation is enforced in chapters 12 and 14 of Magna Carta, and this was a grievance that the colonists listed against the king.
A difference between the Declaration of Independence and these Charters of Liberty is that the Declaration of Independence is not enforceable. However, Magna Carta has an enforcement clause in chapter 61 and states that if the king does not follow Magna Carta, the barons can then petition the king to redress these grievances. He has 40 days or else the barons can take away his personal property, including his favorite castle.
Another key right that appears in each of the three charters was the right to trial by jury, and this appears in chapter 39. And in the Declaration of Independence, he says that in many instances he has deprived us of the right to trial by jury. So this was a very important ancient English right.
Okay, you compared Locke to Hobbes. Can you talk a little bit more about the Hobbesian state of nature and how that may have influenced both in general, the development of conceptions of freedom that went into the founding of the United States?
Hobbes described the state of nature as being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. He believed that people were not inherently evil, but had some aspects that made them evil, and that they were so willing to give up all power to government.
Hobbes believed that when you give one person absolute power, they will oppress that power. And this same example was shown in the Stanford Prison Experiment of 1971, where Dr. Philip Zimbardo tested this theory, and after only 6 days discovered that when you give one group absolute power, they will destroy that power and they will oppress the minority.
So wasn't Hobbes asking, wasn't Hobbes's Leviathan about the people agreeing amongst themselves to give power to a Leviathan with absolute power?
Yes, he believed that in a state of nature, it was a war of all against all. So people agree to come together and give plenary power to a strong government that can protect us from our own human nature.
Mm-hmm. And then even if this plenary power becomes abusive, the state that they're in with this plenary power is better than any state of nature. The state of nature was the worst form of government, and so they had no right to revolution, such as John Locke's second treatise of government.
So I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that Thomas Jefferson and some other guy whose name I didn't catch both said that kind of conflated the traditional rights of Englishmen as being the same as natural rights. Do you think they're the same? Is there any difference?
There is no difference between natural rights, or there is a difference between natural rights and ancient English rights. Many of the English people, including the colonists, believed that their ancient English rights were natural rights, and because we had this very Western idealistic view, we did believe that our natural rights were ancient English rights. So Thomas Jefferson, in fact, is not correct, because our natural rights are rights that we are given when we are born, and not our ancient English rights.
The main difference between natural rights and ancient English rights is that ancient English rights are products of the common law. As we can see, tracing back to Magna Carta, these rights have been enforced multiple times and reconfirmed over 40 times. However, natural rights are products of the Enlightenment, when these Enlightenment thinkers such as John Locke and Montesquieu and Thomas Hobbes had these ideas of state of nature and what rights would evolve if there was no government.
Let me pursue that point a little bit. Is there a difference in the enforceability and the maintenance of natural rights versus ancient English rights? In other words, is there a difference in the guarantee of those rights?
There is no difference between the guarantee of these rights. Each of these types of rights were important to the colonists, and they believed that they should submit power to a government to protect those rights, whether they were ancient or natural. And this is an important factor even today in the importance of government.
I would disagree.
Natural rights only encompasses life, liberty, and property, according to the father of natural rights, John Locke. While our fundamental rights, for example, the Bill of Rights, from the First Amendment all the way to the 10th Amendment, we preserve certain rights and powers that protect us against this government.
To continue on.
Go ahead, I'm interested in your comment. I disagree. Go ahead.
I would disagree, and the reason why is that natural rights, these are rights natural to human beings when we're born. Well, English rights, they've evolved since these charters of liberty, and they will continue to evolve, and so there's this difference in the evolution of these rights.
How about you talk about evolution of rights and how, as you said, they may change. What about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the international application of this evolution?
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights combined both natural rights and rights that we have in our own Constitution. So when Eleanor Roosevelt wrote the Universal Declaration of Independence, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, she looked at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and saw what were the most important rights that she thought that everyone around the whole world should have, and not just people in the United States, such as rights to move freely within other countries.
And the very fact that it is universal is very close to natural rights, because natural rights philosophers believe that people are born with these rights, that everyone is born with these rights, and because it's a universal declaration, is saying that these rights are inherent in universally.
All right, very good. Thank you. Well, very interesting. It was a great exchange. There were some things in the statement that I was really impressed with. The first thing that came immediately to mind was the comment that the Magna Carta had fallen into disuse. It was actually Sir Edward Coke that rescues it. I mean, I think there's a common misconception about the Magna Carta that it starts out in 1215 and it's a steady rise, and in fact it's more like this, and then gets adopted by others in Britain, but also by Americans and used in a very different way. I thought that was very impressive. You know, the question I had for you about the difference between natural rights and the ancient rights of Englishmen, you actually touched on it earlier in your statement, and you talked about how the rights of free speech rights are not guaranteed in Britain as to the extent they are in the United States. And Jonathan, I think you were hunting around the answer to this question. I don't know that we quite got there, but the fact of the matter is, Jefferson would say, Locke would say, that these are rights that we have, and that government can't take them away. Whereas the ancient rights of Englishmen, such as they are subject to revocation and disposition by the legislative bodies. So some of that's driven by a not entirely coherent question that I asked, and I recognize that, but you know, that's kind of where I was going with this. But you certainly did recognize that concept in your statement.
Yeah, I thought it was a fabulous performance. I really enjoyed listening to you guys. I thought, you know, the little tidbits that you had here and there made for a very well-rounded presentation, and made it clear that you guys have been doing reading on your own, finding things that are interesting, like that the Parliament can take away the King's favorite castle. I think that the quotes that you used here and there were meaningful. They weren't there just for no reason. I think you showed a command of political philosophy and the Enlightenment, and to juxtapose Hobbes and Locke, I personally think is very important in terms of how they affect the founders. So fantastic job.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought it was very sophisticated in that, the question sort of talks about the three charters as one, and you described how they were different and how they evolved over time, and then it says how's it related to natural rights philosophy, and you described how not all natural rights philosophy is the same, and that we're more influenced by Locke, and so I thought that was all very good, and I thought your discussion of sort of the history of English rights and natural rights showed a depth of knowledge I would point out one thing is just when you said that someone said that natural rights are only life, liberty, and property, you could argue that that's actually quite encompassing, that any of the discrete rights in the Constitution could be traced back to those principles. But that's just a minor quibble.
You know, you can't cover everything in 4 minutes, but I will say that the question that came up about the Declaration not being enforceable, I'm not sure about that, because the Revolutionary War immediately follows, and actually the Magna Carta itself was not enforced. King John made a point of revocating it, announcing his revocation, if not the same day, shortly thereafter. So it's a really minor technical point, but just something to think about. It was a really strong performance, and we're glad to be part of your day.